Frank Maglin, citizen member.
Jeff Caton, citizen member.
Jim Bernard, Clackamas County Chair.
Wilda Park, citizen member.
Ken Humberston, Clackamas County Commissioner.
Sean Coldwell, citizen member.
Paul Savas, County Commissioner.
Tom Feely, citizen member.
Roxanne Fisher, budget coordinator. Jen Jones, budget coordinator.
The committee will convene on the following dates and time: 8:30 a.m. Wednesday, May 30th, 10 a.m. Thursday, May 31st, and again at 5:30 for public testimony. 8:30 a.m. on Tuesday, June 5th. Should the committee determine it needs additional time, the following dates will be reserved: Wednesday, June 6th, and Thursday, June 7th. And now I'll call for nomination for the chair of the Budget Committee.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to nominate Wilda Parks to serve as chair.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further nominations?
I'd like to nominate Jeff Caton.
Second it.
Okay. We have two nominations, Wilda Park and Jeff Caton. You guys want to campaign?
I don't think we need to do that.
No, I'd be honored to serve again this year.
Yeah.
Okay, well, shall we vote on that? All those for Wilda Park say aye. Well, we'll raise our hands.
Almost hate to vote for myself.
You can vote for yourself.
Okay.
So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5. And for Jeff? 3. Well, Wilda, you're the chair. Are you crazy?
I didn't nominate it.
Now, I'll turn the meeting over to you, and we need some other further nominations.
Thank you very much. The other position that we have that's an elected position from this group is secretary. Having served in that last year, I can tell you it's the easiest job ever. I would call for a nomination for secretary.
Jeff, do you want to be
Yeah,
secretary?
Jeff Caton.
No.
I nominate Jeff Caton.
I'll second that.
Looks
Any
like-
other nominations?
Okay,
Jeff Caton has been nominated for secretary. All those in favor signify by saying aye or raising your hands.
unanimous.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Thank you, Jeff. Call for nomination of a citizen member of the Budget Committee to serve on the Audit Committee. Any of the citizens that would like to do that?
This is the External Audit Committee, right?
Yeah.
Correct.
The
And
external
we
audit.
recently created this position,
I
and,
didn't remember that from last year, so thank you for that. Yeah.
and so, go ahead.
So I'd nominate Frank Maglin.
Second.
Are there any other nominations?
I'd like to nominate Jeff Caton.
Okay, so we have Frank Magdalene and Jeff Caton. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay.
I'd like to humbly decline. I don't know that I'll be able to serve
Okay.
in that capacity this year
Okay.
with my schedule.
Never
So I
mind.
appreciate the
All right.
interest, so I won't-
So we have one nomination for Frank Magdalene.
I'm just curious, does anybody else want to do it? Tom? I mean, who all wants to do audit?
Tom, you interested?
Sean?
No,
You have time? Okay.
no,
All right.
time's a factor.
Okay.
Thank you.
Frank Magdalene, all those in favor, will at least get it in the record.
Aye. Oh, yeah.
All right. Thank you very much.
Unanimous.
That's always a good thing. I'd like to now invite our county administrator, Don Krupp, to deliver the budget message.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I see on the agenda, we have fully 50 minutes scheduled for the county administrator's budget message. I don't think I'm going to need 50 minutes to
It's always a
deliver
good thing.
that, but I'll hopefully be able to provide to you pertinent and useful information as we get started with the budget deliberations process for fiscal year 2018 and 2019. Yes.
I just have one question. I have some comments on the budget message. So you want those after your presentation or during?
I think after the presentation would be terrific. Yes. So I was
Excuse
just
me,
kind of
just
reflecting on
One
this.
one
Yes.
second, thank you. And Just kind of as a point of order, I think when we get into question time or when we're doing presentations and there's questions, let's use these as much as possible, and I'll try as much as I can to kind of watch the table and see who comes in what order for that. So thanks for asking the question, Commissioner Savas, about when to ask questions, because that helps us all a lot. So thank you.
Okay, well, very good. Well, I was reflecting on the fact that this is, I think, budget number 5 that I've had the honor of being able to preside over and to present to the Clackamas County Budget Committee since my tenure here with Clackamas County. And it also is number 17 of the total county budgets I've had the responsibility of presenting and delivering to various jurisdictions in my career. It's hard for me to believe 17 budgets. It just, yeah, it's stunning to me. So
Finally learning how to do it, huh?
yeah, finally figuring it out. I'll tell you, I am very pleased to say that this particular budget is in good shape. It's fully balanced. It will allow us to advance some key goals and priorities for the county. And I think as we're kind of looking out towards the future, we're in pretty good financial shape. And so I owe a lot of that to the quality work of our finance staff who are here today, as well as all of the department directors and elected officials who have responsibilities for carrying out the development and implementation of the annual budget. And then also you, the Budget Committee, for the work you spend each year reviewing, deliberating, and going through with a fine-tooth comb the budget preparation and proposals that are before you. It's a heck of a lot of work and a heck of a lot of investment. And so I'm grateful for the time and effort that you have invested in making this happen. Of course, we have 3 full days scheduled for this week for budget deliberations, including the public hearing on Thursday evening. On Monday, of course, we have then our 7 component units that we will hear from and hear public testimony on, and then reconvene this committee then on the 5th of June to complete our work meeting with the various departments. We've got a full day set aside the following day, Wednesday, if we need it for deliberations, and I would fully anticipate that there'll be some things that come up over the course of the next several days that you'll want to invest some time discussing and going over on that Wednesday. We also have some additional time set aside on Thursday of next week if needed as well. So with that, I'm pleased to present to you the fiscal year 2018-19 annual budget. And for the general government budget, we are looking at a total budget of about $845 million, recognizing our projected annual requirements. Of that, really, when you sort of factor in and you think about the sort of double counts, how we kind of move money through the budget, which gets counted a couple of times, the actual true expenditure dollar represented in that figure is just a hair under $600 million. Now, above and beyond that, when you factor in the component units, which are heard and considered by separate independent budget committees, the total budget responsibility for Clackamas County and its service districts is almost about $1.2 billion, so significant responsibility. Of course, our budget is representative of the core values we share here at Clackamas County, that are service, professionalism, integrity, respect, individual accountability, and trust. And these words were words that our workforce, our own employees, developed to identify what our core values for our organization rolled up into a single term, spirit, for Clackamas County. and drives our approach towards customer service and the working relationships we have amongst our coworkers, as well as the work we do with the county commissioners and yourselves. Also embedded in the budget is the work that we've been doing on Performance Clackamas and implementation of the Board of County Commissioners strategic plan, which has 5 key strategic priorities: building public trust through good government, growing a vibrant economy, building a strong infrastructure, ensuring safe, healthy, and secure communities, and honoring, utilizing, promoting, and investing in our natural resources. I should note that almost all county offices and departments have worked on their strategic business plans in pursuit of the board's strategic goals. The Clackamas County Sheriff's Office is currently in the process, even as we speak, of working on their strategic business plan through Performance Clackamas. The District Attorney's Office is also committed to then following up in the ensuing year on that work. But just about all the county offices and departments have completed that work, and most of the county's budget, as you will see, is intended to represent the budget format that is intended to illustrate the work that we're doing in order to accomplish key results that help us achieve the board's strategic goals. As always, the budget message gives some context about the current indicators about our economic environment. And of course, conditions for Clackamas County continue to show improvements. The unemployment rate continues to drop and performs better than the state and the country as a whole at about 3.6%. That is lower than what was the 5.1% that was present prior to the recession in 2008. And likewise, the value of housing continues to rise, with the median sale price of an average of a typical home in Clackamas County is now at about $400,000, and that compares to a low of about $230,000 in 2012. The average sales is almost about $460,000 for the average sale for a home in Clackamas County. Of course, concomitant with the increase of housing costs are also the effects that has on affordability to some sectors of our population. And as I have included in the budget message, some discussion about the implications and the challenge the county is facing with respect to homelessness. And of course, we do every 2 years a point-in-time count of our homeless population, and there's been some interesting shifts there worth noting. And you'll see that these conditions are what drive at least one policy level proposal that you'll have an opportunity to review and deliberate on through your discussions this year. But if you take a look at page 5 of the budget message, it shows the point-in-time count. And what's noteworthy there, the total count of homelessness between 2015 and 2017 appears to be about a 2% increase, but hidden in the numbers is a significant increase in the number of unsheltered individuals, rising at about 54%, and the number of children and youth affected by homelessness rising at about 33%. And a specific reason that seems to be becoming more and more prominent as to why we are facing increasing concerns about homelessness is that eviction appears to be the third commonly most cited reason for homelessness in 2017. And that is an indication of the fact that housing costs are increasing beyond the pace of increasing incomes. And in fact, if you take a look at a typical renter profile, mean renter wage in the county is about $15.36 an hour. And we're estimating that's what needed to be able to afford what would be a typical two-bedroom apartment at fair market rent is almost $24 an hour. And the number of hours per week at minimum wage that's needed to afford a two-bedroom apartment is about 93 hours per week. If you think about two full-time working household heads working at 40 hours apiece, that 93 hours, exceeds that requirement on the part of the two head of households. And many of our rental households don't have the luxury of being able to have two income earners in those households. Property taxes continue to increase at a rate just slightly under 5% per year. It's estimated for the coming year that the property tax income for the county will be about 4.75%. Our current population in the county is estimated to be better than 413,000. I would suspect that by July of this year, we will see a population that's close to about 420,000 citizens in Clackamas County. And despite the population growth, the construction activity still hasn't really matched the pre-recession levels of construction. So, for example, single-family residential permits, they're running at about 1,200 per year, when prior to the recession on an annual basis, they're running at better than 1,400 new homes per year. Over the course of the past year, we have added about 6.2 million in square footage of the built environment in the county, and that represents almost 400 million in added construction value. About 10% of that, both in terms of square footage and in terms of value, is actually generated and associated with the work of our development agency, work that they do in our former urban renewal areas. Okay. In terms of expenditures, the key driver in the county's expenditures are going to continue to be increases in personnel costs. Our total county personnel costs are estimated to increase over the course of the coming year by almost 10 million, but that represents about a 3.6% increase overall of all current personnel expenditures. In the meantime, what we do in the way of allocated costs, what we charge for internal services for this coming year remain very, very flat. Actually, the increase in the coming year's budget is 1/100% in comparison to the cost of allocated costs in this current year. The total representation of allocated costs is about 3.5% of the total county budget. So we continue to maintain limitations and concerns to make sure that our internal service costs remain efficient and don't end up siphoning off resources that might otherwise be available for direct delivery services. Although I'll say this, what we do in the area of allocated costs, what we pay for there, is essential for us to be able to deliver services to our citizens in the county. The budget that you see does meet our policy objectives of providing for, in the general fund, a 10% reserve of unrestricted general fund revenues and a 5% contingency of general fund revenues, and we meet that goal consistently, and we plan around that 10% reserve and 5% contingency as we look to what we're able to do in the coming year. And the number of full-time positions is currently holding steady It's about a 1.5% in the total increase in staffing from this current budget year to the proposed budget. Most of those FTEs are actually not funded by the county's general fund, but are in fact funded by other sources, such as our health centers, where a very healthy and sustainable health clinic environment is allowing us to be able to continue to increase capacity to serve the needs of the citizens we serve in those health centers. And we've made some significant increases in our facilities work group over the course of the past couple of years in order to try to address deferred deferred maintenance needs of the county. And we are also starting to see increases in the workforce in the Department of Transportation and Development as we begin to deploy the resources from House Bill 2017, which has provided the county with additional transportation monies to be able to enhance our ability to maintain our roads in the county. In terms of the key issues there, of course, we want to continue to pay close attention to the capacity and the sustainability of our general fund, because the general fund represents that funding source that has the widest discretion of use towards key priorities of the county. And we are continuing to work on trying to streamline our internal service delivery system. We actually have a business analysis process underway for our finance and human resources department in order to make sure we are working in those areas as effectively and as efficiently as we can. We continue to address the effects of the PERS retirement system and have fully programmed and planned those added expenditures in our long-term projections. So those are factored in, particularly in our general fund projections. We plan ahead and looking at our 5-year projections to make sure that we have accounted for the fact that those costs will continue to increase. And of course, we are also facing an interesting time where we are seeing an interest in leadership in the organization to retire. And so we are beginning to see changes in transition in our appointed executive team. I mean, just recently, this includes not just appointed, but also elected officials, our very capable and honorable county assessor, Mr. Bob Roman, retired, and we've appointed Tammy Little to serve as the county assessor while there is an election pending to formally replace Mr. Roman. But we've also seen changes in the Director of Transportation and Development. Our Finance Director, Mr. Mark Gonzalez, has announced his intentions on retiring. Of course, Diane Padilla, our budget manager, is retiring here at the end of this fiscal year, although I haven't approved the paperwork just yet. Not sure I'm going to, but
Seems like all the people that handle the money are retiring. Is there a message in that?
we need to take a close look at things, so we will do that. In addition to that, we have an over 20-year-old financial management system, and we are in the process of examining what it's going to take to replace that. That's probably going to be a cost of anywhere from $8 to $10 million. We've begun setting aside a reserve to help us begin to plan for that, but our current financial management system is expected to not be supported by the current vendor in the future. We really need to begin planning for a system that will meet our needs in the future and that will also better work with and interact with our labor management system as well. So we are currently working on that. And then we have a number of other significant capital needs looming ahead. First and foremost of those is the work that we're currently doing with the courthouse and the plans to be able to construct and operate a courthouse up here at the Red Soils campus. We are also working on planning for ultimately the replacement of our Public Works Yard, which is down in the Abernathy Road area in Oregon City, and is in an area that's subject to flooding, and we deeply need to find a more suitable site for that. And looming out in the distance as well is a need at some point to replace our jail and also to expand our Family Justice Center facility. Our 911 dispatch center is another area at some point we're going to need to work towards replacing, as is our disaster management center as well. So we've got a lot of long-term capital needs above and beyond just trying to maintain those current facilities in a way that allow them to meet our current needs. There's a number of facilities over the time we're going to need to plan for replacing. I bet you if I roll the numbers up, we've probably got about $1 billion worth of capital construction, facility construction that's looming out there we're going to need to plan for in the future. And then, as you are familiar with, we plan our budget around a maintenance level assumption, which calculates the cost of maintaining current services to serve citizens. And we have a fairly intricate formula that Diane Padilla is the keeper of in terms of how we plan that, work that for personnel and benefit costs and other variables there. But I did want to make sure I pointed out to you that in putting together this particular budget, we had identified a couple of areas and a couple of departments that special attention needed to be given to in order to maintain our current maintenance level support for those departments. One, of course, is our disaster management department, which has been affected by reductions in the emergency management performance grants that gets awarded to us through the state of Oregon, and which we support with a 50% match. We had a briefing with the board several months ago, and the board asked us to come up with a strategy to keep them whole in the coming budget. So we have allocated $250,000 for 2 years to help make them whole in the face of those reductions in state revenue, so we can continue the work that they do at current levels. And we've also had to provide about $25,000 to support the medical examiner's office. Some of you may not realize, but our disaster management director is also responsible for essentially the coroner services or the medical examiner services. Then our resolution services department has been working over time on putting together a service delivery model that have them operating very much like an enterprise, where they are making their very skillful mediation and dispute resolution services available to departments and public agencies that need that help. But the state funding resources that they rely on haven't kept pace. In order to keep them whole, we have provided a one-time increase in general fund support to help them maintain their current complement of staff and capability and make sure they have a fund balance. They will also be able to implement a new data system to help bridge their service delivery gap in the ensuing years. One of the other things that turned out to be too good to be true not to do is an effort that we have put together with the assessor's office. A while back, the county assessor asked if we could take a look at a particular aerial imaging technology called pictometry, and this company at a very, very low cost provides outstanding, high-quality aerial imagery, the like of which Google cannot stand a candle to. And so it has implications not just for the county assessor's office and the work that they do, but also the work that our law enforcement agencies do, our disaster management department does, our code enforcement operations, and at a very affordable $115,000 a year, about fifth of which will be covered by state funds. We are including in this budget implementation of that pictometry program. It's really worth a look at. It's quite remarkable. And this is technology which has been being implemented all over the country going to be a good investment. The other area that we needed to implement a sort of one-time support for is in our Public and Governmental Affairs Department. We moved the cable operations into the general fund, and as a consequence, that affected the rate structure for the allocated costs for the department. So we have placed in there a one-time general fund contribution in order to make sure Public and Governmental Affairs remains whole, and that will not be required in the ensuing years. That'll get picked up in the rate structure again. And of course, this coming year, we did not do what we've done in some prior years, which is to solicit a number of proposals for policy level proposals from departments. Those of you who've been on the Budget Committee for some time know that in the past, I've invited county departments to be able to submit their list of unmet needs, and then we've gone through a process of reviewing and prioritizing those and then selecting those that then get incorporated into the budget. This year, and this is really driven by key priorities that we have heard from the Board of County Commissioners in the coming year, we have three larger scale policy level proposals to discuss with you. The first and foremost one is related to our housing affordability and our homelessness issues. We are proposing a $1.2 million general fund commitment to be able to support housing initiatives here in Clackamas County. You will see in the policy level proposal descriptions about how we might envision those resources to be able to be deployed, primarily focused on the actual creation of affordable housing units and using these funds to leverage affordable housing units. But there's also funds dedicated to providing supportive services and wraparound services and case management services, as well as providing some planning and capacity building capabilities in that package. And we'll get a chance to review that in some detail as we go through budget deliberations in the coming year, in the coming 2 weeks. And the second policy level proposal is a subject that some of you have seen before. We have had on multiple occasions a request from the Sheriff's Office to be able to fully staff the Clackamas County Jail. There's a bank of about 26 beds in the county jail for which we do not have sufficient dedicated staff to be able to cover the posts necessary in order to open those specific beds. It's a cost of about $1.1 to $1.2 million, and because that cost has a significant continuing obligation, because it involves the hiring of staff and maintaining of staff, training and equipping of those staff, we've not been able to make that sizable commitment in past budget years. What I'm suggesting to you is we set aside and we reserve funds beginning this year with the goal that in the next 2 years we will continue to add that funding commitment out of the general fund so that we would be able then to fully fund the posts that are necessary to open up and operate those 2 beds. And so what we've done for this coming year is we've set aside about $445,000. This was money that was originally general fund money that was directed to the Transportation and Development Department to do road maintenance work, but because of the significant increased state support for road maintenance work, we're recommending that we redirect that particular resource. $55,000 of that will be used to support the Mount Hood Express bus service And then the remaining $445,000 we're asking to be simply set aside into what would be a reserve and a ongoing capability to be able to pull together more resources so that either next year or the ensuing year, we would have enough resources to be able to open up those jail beds. So we're planning ahead for that and wanting to finally get our arms around this. This is a subject that comes up every year when the grand jury does its inspection of the jail, and a recommendation that they make every year that we undertake. And then the third policy level proposal that you will see and have a chance to discuss has to do with marijuana. And we, with the county not having opted out, we are receiving almost $600,000 a year in state collections of tax from cannabis sales in Clackamas County. And the voter-approved local tax that we enacted a couple of years ago is bringing in a little bit better than $500,000 a year. So we are estimating, at least for the current time, an ongoing income of about $1.1 million in funds related to cannabis. About half of that, the local share of that, given the way the ballot measure was worded, must be dedicated to code enforcement, law enforcement, treatment, and prevention related to substance abuse. And so that's about $510,000 or so that must be dedicated to that. The state revenue share, about the $590,000 or so, doesn't have those restrictions and limitations on it. It originally did, but state law was changed to eliminate those restrictions, and it's now simply recognized as a revenue to the general fund, and we are proposing that we deploy those resources to help us be able to do a job protecting quality of life issues associated with the growing, production, processing, and retailing of marijuana in Clackamas County. And so you'll see a package there that has been put together by our code enforcement staff, our planning staff, the county sheriff's office, county council, and the district attorney's office to show a consolidated, unified effort as to how we might, and also, Health, Housing, and Human Services as well, with a treatment initiative as well with that. So you will see those in the budget proposal. How are we doing time-wise? We're doing okay. I hope I'm not too tedious for you here. This is, you will get a chance a little later on in your review to talk about elected officials' compensation. As is every year, we do have a Citizens Compensation Board that makes regular recommendations to you. The recommendations that you'll have a chance to hear more about are discussed on page 8, and the principal areas of concern will be some changes to the district attorney, the county commissioners, and the county clerk's salary. There's also some changes recommended for the justice of the peace and the assessor. There's a modest 2% increase proposed for the treasurer. There is no change proposed for the coming year for the county sheriff's office. And we'll get a chance to hear the logic and understanding behind that a little later in your deliberations. I also included in my budget message a whole host of highlights from the coming year. And when I read through these, it's really remarkable to me how much good stuff we are engaged in doing across the board, ranging from law enforcement, public safety, mental health services, and our financial management. I don't know if you know this year, but we were upgraded from AA1 to AAA in our bond rating here in the county, which is quite an accomplishment. Our last financial audit had virtually no audit findings in them, an effort I want us to continue to replicate there as well. We have a significant investment in our public outreach and our social media. We have more than 6,000 followers of our Facebook page, and our tweets that we make. I won't say that these are probably read as often as the president's tweets are, but we get some 2.6 million views of our tweets. And our YouTube presentations, the video views are about 104,000 video views over the course of the last year. So our Public and Governmental Affairs Office is really reaching out. And in order to help our community outreach efforts, we also took some steps with our CPO organizations to help cover their risk and liability this coming year, so they feel more confident in their participation in public processes and feel protected and insulated from what might be sort of spurious legal challenges to the work that they do and that we rely on in our land use management process. In the area of transportation safety, we actually saw a reduction this last year in fatalities, and we hope that trend continues. Our forest management operation, which is used to help raise revenues to pay for our operations and maintenance work in our county parks, is working towards the purchase of an additional 2,500 acres to add to our current 3,200 acres. So we have an added commitment to managing our county forest resources for the benefit of the public. On top of that, that same group has been working with county commissioners, Commissioner Humberson in particular, on the development of a capacity for us to be able to implement CLT implemented here in the county, a vital opportunity that actually allows our forest management practices to align with our environmental values and also provide for jobs and new industries in the county. The county sheriff's office, our interagency task force, which investigates, deters, and combats illegal drug use, manufacturing, distribution, and related crimes, has worked to seize some 23.4 pounds of heroin, 406 pounds of methamphetamine, 6.7 pounds of cocaine and crack, 2,323 pounds of marijuana, illicit marijuana, and 6,512 illicit prescription pills, along with catching about $220,000 worth of cold hard cash in their efforts. Other noteworthy efforts over the course of this past year has been the agreement between the county and the city of Gladstone that will enable us to be able to move forward with the development of 2 libraries. Our ability to have reconciled that litigation successfully, I think, puts us on track to be able to work towards design and plan a library for the Oak Lodge service area and the Gladstone community, 2 libraries that will work together to represent the kind of library services that the communities really deserve and desire out there. And we're very much looking forward to being able to move forward with that. So I've talked a bit about the policy level proposals in my recommendations to you. Again, we will continue to work towards managing the implications of the PERS reserve, or the PERS costs. We do have a $2.7 million reserve to help mitigate the implications of that on the general fund over time. We continue to work with the county sheriff's office with developing a regular 5-year forecast and financial plan with the sheriff's office so that we can continue to make sure we're able to provide services, law enforcement services at a maintenance level in the sheriff's office. And one of the other issues that you heard about last year that we are making progress on has to do with our benefits administration. Budget committee members will recall we had a considerable discussion about the fact that we had to, in effect, sequester about 2.6 million of our general fund to serve as a guarantee to our benefits administration reserve fund. And we had to increase the benefits administration rates that hadn't been released or increased in decades. It was kind of one of those things where we kept kicking the can down the road, and we are in the process now of working towards having the adequate reserve in place. This year's budget, there'll be a commitment, a $1 million reserve sustained, and the plan for the rate structure over the course of the next year and a half will allow us to achieve that $2.6 million reserve that is wholly and fully dedicated to the purposes of benefits administration. So we will have weaned ourselves off of the guarantee from the general fund for that. And I did mention that cost allocation expenditures are flat and not increasing significantly, although this does differ from program to program and department to department, depending on the nature of those departments. If you'll look on page 12 and page 13 of the budget message, we talk about how that works. But the overall increase in allocated costs for fiscal year 18-19 totals about $117,000, which represents a change of about 1/3% from the prior year. So I'm feeling pretty good about the fact that we're containing those internal service delivery costs. So with that, that completes my budget message presentation to you. I know you've got some questions here you'd like to ask. I'm happy to try to respond.
Very good. Commissioner Savas had asked in the beginning about questions, so I'm going to have him first, then Commissioner Bernard, and then Mr. Magdalene. One thing before that is you referred to CLT, and I think for those that might be listening to this or watching, or even some of the people maybe in the audience.
Laminated timber.
Right, cross-laminated timber, and it is really, Clackamas County is positioned very well to be the leader in that in the state. So thank you for that comment. Also, just want to be sure that we're checking the time. We have about 10 minutes for questions and responses before we hear from Ms. Zentner and the Business and Community Development. So thank you. Mr. Commissioner Savas?
Yeah, well, thank you. Before I ask my questions, I just want to understand on the front end, before we get too far along, process question. Each year, we've always been concerned about the staff presentation taking up a huge block of the time with inadequate time for questions. And I think did we not arrive at about a 50-50 half the time?
Yes.
Okay, so the administrator's way over his time, correct? I'm serious. I am serious.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I really do want to get through my questions, but by all means, we're already behind.
Yes.
So, with that, I do want to start with my question. So, on page 7 of the budget message, you've got a one-line county personnel services at 9.8 million, and not much really elaborates on that. I'd like to, go in the next day or so, maybe have the last 5 years of that, so we can better understand what that looks like. And the reason why is that on tab 2, page 55 and 58, I believe, shows the trend lines for revenues and expenses, and what I call the jaws of death. You have a faster rate of incline on expenditures than we do on revenues, and I understand the revenue picture. I think you did a great job elaborating on what the forecast is for tax income, property tax income, which is basically our revenue stream, but nothing to really answer the question, which is why I'm getting back to this faster growing red line on tab 2, page 55, and also on page 58. That concerns me. And I would also like to know what that looks like, or maybe even get the budget message or those same forecasts for the last 5 years. So, because we have had the last few years here differing forecast. And so I don't have a lot of security that things are as firm or solid or secure financially as maybe the budget message conveys, because that's striking to me. That shows a growing disparity. Is that not correct, Administrator?
Well, I don't know that, because this is the entire county budget. It's not just the general fund, so there are multiple fund sources embedded in this, including the debt for the bond for the C-800 radio bond, which probably represents part of the bump. If you see, like in the prior fiscal year in that line, that trend line, an increase in what are revenues, and of course, in the coming year, we're going to be paying off the debt for that $58 million bond measure. So that's part of it. But so what you're seeing there is some buy down of some capital one-time costs, and not necessarily what would be ongoing maintenance level costs in that. If you look at the next chart and you actually see the FTE chart, you'll see that the growth in FTEs overall is essentially very, very flat. So I'm happy to, as we kind of go through deliberations, we can drill down on this for you a little bit more and get you some more specific numbers that sort of drive that. I can tell you, though, that I am not particularly concerned about our capacity to be able to continue to meet ends meet in the total budget overall.
Well, okay, well, I appreciate that, but as we go down just a couple lines on page 6 of tab 1, when you say that the FTEs are holding steady at an increase of an average of 30 per year, that's, well, just ballpark a couple $1 million a year increase each and every year, compounded, I think somewhat speaks to maybe that incline as well. I mean, if they were flat, but we're seeing, if you look at 2015, 16, and 2013, and we're 116 higher, but averaging 30 a year per year, that's a growing number.
Yeah, as I've said, a great number of those are actually embedded in just a few key departments over time. And you can actually see that history in a chart. Let me see if I can get you the proper page for that.
Be in tab 3, tab
Under-
3, page 62.
And well, that's the dollar variable on page 62. It's page 61, though, that shows the FTE changes over time from 2015 to proposed in 2018 and 19. And you can see the breakdown by specific department there. So, for example,
It's tab 2, sorry.
I'm sorry, I couldn't find tab 3. So tab 2, 63?
Ledger.
and
Makes more sense.
yeah. So, for example, if
61.
you look on page
63, I think
61,
she's-
and you look under Health, Housing, and Human Services, you will see in 2015, 2016, there were 501 FTEs there, and they're currently running at about 535. And most of that FTE growth is going to be explained by the demand and the income from that demand from our health centers and our health clinics. That's the one area where we are very much responsive to our demands from the community, as well as our capabilities to be able to cover those specific costs. I suspect also embedded in that are some very specific grant related positions that would drive that. If you look up at the sheriff's office, there are about 10 FTEs
161.
that have been added from
61.
2015 to 2018.
Tab two.
And off the top of my head, I can't tell you the specifics underlying those. There have been some FTEs that had been funded through the allocation from the ELED into the budget. I don't know that that would explain all of those.
Well, yeah, I appreciate, I don't want to spend too much time on that, but I think it's just, my concern is the trend, and also the trend of the FTE going up. So, I mean, if the trend for this time next year is another 30 more, that's about a $2 million load, easy. I mean, I think pretty rough numbers there, but, that's just a concern. And not having, this being the second year of not having much in the way of discretionary money for the Budget Committee for unsolicited policy-level proposals is a concern as well. I mean, so it doesn't seem like times are getting better in my 7 years, or my 8th budget year here, but actually tighter. And that's just my experience. The other thing I want to point out is that on the first bullet on page 6, tab 1, you mentioned the reserves are budgeted with unrestricted. In your comments, you mentioned that general fund reserve was unrestricted, but just a correction, that is actually somewhat tapped into with the self-insurance fund? So it's not really totally, really unrestricted,
Yeah, we
correct?
basically said that 2.6 million of that would be a guarantee for the self-insurance fund, but this coming year, that is reduced by $1 million. So it reduces from 2.6 to 1.6, and the strategy underlying the rate structure will be to completely wean that guarantee from the general fund reserve.
So that statement's not really accurate then.
Yeah, actually, it is accurate, because the only way and only reason you would actually be, have an obligation on that 2.6 million is if we stopped our current funding mechanism for our benefits program, and we got out of the current business that we're currently in, and we're not planning on doing that. So it's required to be there as a guarantee in case we were. But there's no likelihood at all that we would have any obligation on that 2.6 million in the course of the coming couple of years.
I see that Ms. Padilla has a comment to that, so we'll,
Regarding the reserve, we are actually above the 15% or the 10% level, because in addition to the policy level, there's the money, the unspent portion of the general obligation bonds. They show in the beginning fund balance, and they show in the reserve, because we can't, they're spoken for. So they're in the reserve so that they can't be otherwise spent. There's also the $445,000 as a seed money to start funding the jail beds. That's in addition to the policy level. Now, within the policy level reserve, there's actually, we did better than you thought. There's only about $900,000 that's contingently dedicated, if you will, to the benefits.
Okay.
And
Well,
Donna will
that brings me,
explain
thank you for that. That brings me to the other really question, the 500,000 diluted down to the 445. So the 445 towards that jail beds, is that total need for the sheriff's office? That's not a one-time need, right? That's an annual need, right?
That's, the annual need is more like 1.2 million.
Annual.
So this really represents what would be a third of the cost of filling those jail beds. So what we're doing is we're simply banking it so that we can meet that obligation in the future.
So years ago, when we actually allotted that as a policy level from the Budget Committee for paving, I just want to say that was something that I thought really it should be a policy. And I know this is your proposed budget, but it is a policy in which this Budget Committee established. So I kind of want to have a discussion a little bit, maybe when DTD's up here in the coming days, to talk about that at some degree. But I just want to point out for the members of the Budget Committee that money, substantial money we get from HB 2017 is contingent upon a deadline to ODOT to complete a project. If not, that money does not start flowing until that project's complete, which is the northern work on I-205. It was actually written in the HB 2017 in the legislation. So the money doesn't flow automatically. It's contingent upon a completion of a project. So that's I just want to put that out there, so we can check with Dan and maybe Chris Lyons, our legislative staff, if there's any doubt as to that.
you continue to have questions, Commissioner Savas?
Yeah, I do, but we'll share. So
Yeah, do you
let me
mind?
catch up, and I only got on one page. I got several more to go.
Much, appreciate that. Commissioner Bernard.
So now that we're AAA rated, I have a slow leak on my tire in the right rear.
Yeah.
Couple of things.
We'll be out there in about 8 hours, so.
So, one of the, I think, kind of confusing comments was the 4.75% property tax growth. We have a limitation of 3%, so that actually demonstrates growth in building and construction. And I think it confuses people. I don't want people to think we're raising taxes 4.75%. We have a limitation of 3%. So just to be clear on that. You know, one thing I don't know after almost 10 years here is what debt do we have? Is this building paid for?
No. Nope.
And so what buildings are not paid for? And what are the bonds that exist that we're paying for? I don't know that if that's in here specifically or not.
It's not, but we can get you the roll-up information on it.
Interesting to see.
Yeah, because you say in,
You might have an answer.
there's one thing you say in here is obligated proceeds of 7.2 million obligated proceeds, bond proceeds.
Yeah, Mr.
That-
Gonzalez, can you, or
Sorry,
Ms.
that
Padilla?
one I've got.
Either one?
The 7.2 million is the premium on the bond to pay for the radios. So there's 7.2 million there that the commissioners have yet to decide what to do with. So it's in reserve, so it doesn't get otherwise spent.
Okay.
We
and then-
requested from the public 59 million, and our bid on the bonds gave us a premium of about 7 million, 7.1.
Oh, okay. As far as debt on our structure.
These buildings are being financed over time. They were built, the first was built in 2004, this one was built in 2008. We financed them with bonds. To some extent, the departments that occupy these buildings are paying rent that offsets a portion of that debt service. The balance of it's being borne by the general fund. I can give you some more information this afternoon when I come back and talk about the finance department about when those bonds will be extinguished. We have moved, because of the changes in interest rates over time, we've moved to refund a number of bonds that were outstanding in order to make interest savings, and we do that on a regular basis when we examine the debt load of the county, which is not particularly large.
Okay, thank you. The 400,000 set aside for purchase of software, which would, I think it says 18 months, we ought to have that resolved. The 8 to 10 million, does that include implementation, or is that the software itself? And the 400,000, usually when you buy software, do you have to pay an upfront cost of, let's say, 8 million, or?
Yeah, so that's just really a
During
rough number
licensing
as
as
to what
well.
we think it's going to cost us to replace our financial management system. We don't have what would be a firm dollar price, because we've got a lot of work ahead of ourselves before we are ready to go out and bid for a particular product. But this is just a very rough estimate as to what we think it would cost us to acquire a new financial management system.
Okay, and then just one final comment on the 500,000. The additional taxes on gasoline increase the amount of money we have available for paving. And the idea back then, my understanding, having been here, was that the 500,000 was to supplement the lack of funding that we got for paving. And the theory now is that we are, while it's not adequate, we have a substantial growth in paving monies, and let's use this money to do other important things. That's my understanding.
And it's important to point out that $500,000 that we had allocated to the Transportation and Development Department wasn't actually used for paving. It was used to pay for those things that were eligible general fund expenditures that the road fund had been paying for.
That's right.
That are also eligible expenditures for the road fund, or the gas tax. So it was essentially a way of freeing up road fund money to be able to do more road maintenance work in the road fund.
Because your comment clarifies we can't use property tax revenue to pave roads. And it supplemented the costs that we might use for personnel or whatever.
Yes.
Thanks.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Commissioner Bernard. Mr.
I have
Magrum.
two questions,
Put your
please.
thingy down.
One, of our full-time equivalent employees, how many are fee paid for, and how many are by grants? I know you're not gonna have that in the top, but it goes back to what's the risk in what the general fund has to support. Number two, could we get a copy of the old write-up that gave the county the AA from the rating agencies and what the AAA, and we'll use somebody else's unbiased opinion as to how well we're doing. We're doing well, but to look at that, to find out what did we do or what did happened in the county to improve the rating. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Feely?
Thank you. I'll defer my question on the ERP until Mark is back this afternoon. I do have a question for Don on the jail bed proposal. The 445 we're reserving for next year. Was there any discussion with the sheriff on implementing the staffing for the full 21 incrementally over 3 years rather than waiting sort of big bang? And part of my concern with that is the length of time it takes to get a new sheriff's employee on board and functional through the training process.
That's a really good point, and we have discussed this with the sheriff's and staff. Of course, the part of the problem is when you're staffing a post, what you're really doing is staffing a post for 24 hours, and so you don't really have an opportunity to partially staff the post at what would be an adequate level to cover the kind of supervision that's needed for those
No, I
beds.
totally understand that.
And with regard to the
But is there a way to open fewer jail beds next year and then open more the following year?
I
Or
think
should I
it's
ask
all
them?
driven by where the post is situated and
Yeah.
located, is what, so the physical facility has a big role to play in terms of what's needed to actually support the supervision necessary.
Yeah, having toured it, I can imagine.
Yeah, and with regard to the timeline for staffing up, I suspect what we'll end up doing is if we begin looking at what next, not this coming year's budget, but the following fiscal year's budget looks like, you'll be seeing something that comes from county administration that is intended to sequester more resources and money that might then allow and enable us to make a commitment to begin the staff hiring and training.
Okay, well, I think that would be
Because
reasonable, yeah.
it'll take 6
Yeah, otherwise
months.
this may be a 4-year
Yeah.
ramp up instead of 3. And then just finally, on page 12, where you talk about PERS it said the Oregon legislature crafted a solution, the Oregon Supreme Court rejected PERS reform. I don't think they rejected the notion of PERS reform as much as that individual proposal, which was found to be unconstitutional. And the legislature knew that was a possibility because this is the second time it's happened. So that's just an editorial comment.
Can I just add to that comment?
Very quickly.
Yeah, very quickly. Actually, and in fact, that was partially implemented. It was not fully overturned. So, thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Humberstein?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Just briefly, I'd like to thank Ms. Padilla for her assistance on this. I had about 20 or 30 more technical questions, and she spent a great deal of time with me walking me through some of those things, and I very much appreciated that, so I don't have to ask 20 or 30 questions during this process.
Well,
I
thank
still have-
goodness for
I
that.
still have a few as we go forward, but a lot of it got taken care of, so thank you so much for that. The administrator, Don, you had indicated that there were a number of one-time funding for various departments. My question on that is simply, is there a plan to replace those funds from other sources in the cases where that's necessary? I would assume that there is, and can we get a report on that in the future?
Yes, the
So we
answer is
know
yes
that they're
to that.
making progress in replacing those funds.
The answer is yes to that. So
And then another point was that on the current service level for resolution services on page 7, again, it was a one-time increase. So it really, I guess it really relates to that first question, which is getting a report to make sure their results are achieved.
Yes.
Because they're going to have to look for funding sources.
Yeah, and with resolution services, there's a couple of things going on that represent opportunities towards achieving sustainability, and we'll have Ms. McNeil address those when she gives her budget presentation to you.
Okay. Then, under Public and Government Affairs, it listed a number of the successes that we had legislatively speaking. I think it was a 94% success rate on those legislative proposals that we supported or opposed. There were 2 additional ones that came up. They weren't really through PGA directly. They actually occurred more through Association of Oregon Counties. That came to both Commissioner Fishner and my attention. One was a rape kit processing bill, and the other was a strangulation bill, which both Commissioner Fisher and I testified on, and we were successful on those. So the money that gets spent to send us down there to have these conferences and whatnot like that does pay off in very personal ways sometimes. And finally, I just want to reiterate something you kind of quietly mentioned, but in my opinion, is extraordinarily unique. In 50 years of serving on boards, I can never recall any time that an audit that occurred that there were 0 findings. There is almost always something that the auditor says you should have done differently. And to get a 0 findings is just really remarkable, which may answer Mr. Magdalen's question as to why we got a AAA rating, at least to some degree. So that's my comments for now. Thank you.
The auditor did have things he wanted us to do. It's just that a finding goes to a certain level,
Yes.
and we had none that were to that level.
But-
I've been the chair of the audit committee since we created it.
Well, good job there, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Sabas, do you have
Yeah,
another question?
so I do want to point out to everyone, and of course, it's really came home this weekend when we had 2 rescues up on Mount Hood, significant rescues. And I'm in preparation for the upcoming budget discussion with law enforcement and so on, and even this $500,000, frankly, of road money, should that be, again, redirected, that we maybe share with the Budget Committee the ordinance and statute that requires search and rescue, and have a discussion maybe even with the sheriff. But it's something that hasn't really been funded, as it has been funded in other counties, and I'm not sure we're really meeting our state requirements. So I'll make a plea for that at the right time, but I just don't want, in preparation, to have that statute prepared, and also an opportunity for maybe from somebody from Search and Rescue to make an appeal. One thing I didn't understand in your proposal, this is my last question, the PGA money, this $940,000, is that not really passed through? Or that just really, it sounded more than just a budget line reallocation or a movement. It sounded like there's actually a cost.
It would otherwise have been picked up as a part of the cost allocation. It's not a what you would regard as a sort of a significant increase in costs for public and governmental affairs. It's where the funds come from in order to pay for public and governmental affairs. Diane, would you like to?
Yes, we did some restructuring in PGA, and one of the things was that the cable revenue was recognized in PGA's operation. So when it came time to calculate the allocated costs at the end of that period, it looked like PGA didn't, according to the federal formula, need any money because they had their allocations that had been sustaining them before, and then they had this input for the first year showing of the cable revenue. So according to the formula, they needed a whole lot less allocated costs. And subsequently, their allocated costs are reduced about 50%, meaning all the rest of the county is paying a lot less than they did before, the difference being the $915,000. So to make them whole, this one time, because of the change in methodology, the general fund is stepping in and in effect giving them the same money they had before. And then the next time that costs are allocated, that won't be a factor.
So it's revenue neutral in the end?
In the end, yes.
In the end is a 1 year's time?
Yes, I would say so, because, well, the 915 is strictly general fund money. It would have come from various places in the county through their paying a higher allocated cost for the year. They're saving money, the general fund is paying it for this 1 year till it evens out again.
All right,
Okay.
good enough.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.